And our guest today is Duke Manyweather. You teased him earlier. He is an offensive line guru. What do we?
We'll
What can
let
we refer to you as, Duke?
we'll let you do it.
Hey, you can refer to me anything you want, man. I like to say that I'm a student of the game, and I just play a small role in helping these guys realize their potential. But you guys can call me whatever you want. I'm just a fat kid that loves O-line.
like Tiger has a swing coach. Brandon Aubrey has a special guy he works with,
Yeah,
and you work with lots of different offensive linemen who have ended up having great success. You've helped put a lot of guys into the first round of the NFL draft and in the NFL draft in general, and including the Cowboys' newest guard, correct? Tyler Booker. You worked closely with him.
Yes, absolutely, man. And me and Tyler have had a relationship for a while in terms of training and advising and things of that nature. And every chance he got during spring breaks and stuff like that, he would come down and work. Last year, he bought down his two tackles from Alabama and Caden Proctor and Wilkin Fromby, and they spent almost 2 weeks down here. And when one thing about Tyler Booker that you come away impressed with is, you turn on this film and it's really good film, but you come away impressed with who he is as a person. Very strong work ethic, just really natural leadership qualities. Really a likable guy, but can also hold people accountable. And I think that's important when you're talking about those leadership qualities. Is like, can you get people to follow you? And I think that is all personality characteristics and traits that Tyler Booker possesses.
yeah, and I saw some people almost taking that as shade towards Tyler Smith, but I don't think it has to be that. It's more, but there's always going to be a guy in any unit who is the most vocal, and it always works better if the guy's believable, and if everybody
Yeah,
knows like that's he's not faking the funk at all, like that's that guy. And it sounds like you and others are saying that's who he is, which I love,
yeah,
especially stepping in for Zach Martin.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like Tyler Smith is going to do everything that he needs to do to help bring that room along. And Tyler Smith from day one has been a guy that has just continued to improve. But here's the thing you got to look at in Dallas. Dallas has always had a room of two and three guys that were leaders. I mean, you had Zach Martin, you had Tyron Smith. At one point, you had Travis Frederick, and then even Tyler Biotish. Tyler Biotish, in his last couple of years, took on a leadership role, and so when all of a sudden you've got Zach retiring and you've got Tyron retiring and moved on from last year, Tyler Biotish is no longer on the line. They're looking for, all right, who's going to take the reins of this O line room? And, you got to believe that, maybe there is a Cooper Beebe that steps up in conjunction with Tyler Smith. But I mean, Tyler Smith is doing what he needs to do to lead. I don't know why people are thinking this is taking a shade, but like the other thing is this is the more of those type of offensive linemen and just personalities that you have that want to lead and that want make sure that everybody buys in, it makes your room better, and I think it sounds like what Coach Schottenheimer wants is an entire team that, and I use this term all the time, is obsessiveness, and he wants people that are obsessive with football and obsessive with the process, and that is really and truly the culture that he wants to facilitate over in Frisco. So I think Tyler Booker fits that. I think that with the combination of Tyler Booker, I think with a combination of Tyler Booker, Tyler Smith, Cooper Beebe, you got a really physical interior offensive line.
And you're located in Frisco, right? Your place?
I am. So, I get to see these guys in terms of training and even sometimes during the season with film quite often. And so I think that is a plus. And I'm really excited. I was telling Mike Palucci this last night. At the very least, this may be the deepest Cowboys offensive line room in terms of quality depth that we've seen in a very long time, which will foster competition. Now, you don't have your Tyron Smith, you don't have your Travis Frederick, you don't have your Zach Martin, so you're still trying to figure out your best five. But now finding your best five and then your best sixth man, your best seventh man, your best eight man, what is your top 10 now? I think with some of the moves they made this offseason with signing free agents, and I think you're going to see some really good competition in that room. So I'm excited to see how it plays out.
How different is it, like when guys shift from right tackle to left guard?
Mm-hmm.
How
it,
big of a deal is that?
It's not a give me. It's not a give me. I could tell you that. I'll say this in terms of like Tyler Booker, who, I mean, he's got close to 200 snaps at right guard at Alabama. So, you know, I think that he'll be fine. But say you've got a guy that's played primarily left tackle or primarily right tackle, and you try to switch sides and vice versa sometimes. It's not a gimme. It's awkward. It's a different, you end up having to get into a different stance, which changes your different angles of departure for pass pro. It changes the timing of your steps and your body positioning in the run game. The other thing is this, is like if you have been predominantly a predominant left guard and you're really good with your inside hand, you're probably not going to be just as good with your inside hand on the right side. You're probably going to be more effective with your outside hand because you've been so good with that right hand that is your inside hand at left guard. So it's just small little nuanced stuff like that I think the average fan thinks that, oh, well, it's just O-line. It's easy for them to change positions. Not all guys have success changing positions and changing sides. It takes deliberate reps. It takes doing things with intent. And the first thing you've got to really do is when you're switching sides is figure out a functional stance for that specific side and position, and then start to work your departures in the pass game and run game, and then start to work on how to recover out of those movements, because offensive line is all a learned skill and they're learned movements. And so it's learning new movement patterns on the opposite side. I mean, picture this. So, and I was telling a player this the other day. I said, a pitcher has a certain setup that he does with every single pitch when he's going to release the ball. All right. A quarterback has a certain drop back and posture that he plays with every single time he drops back and throws the ball. A golfer has a certain setup and swing that he's going to swing through. Same thing with a home run hitter. So for offensive line, when we talk about our stance and our departures, it has to be tailor-made to us for us to get the most out of those takeoffs. And so when you tell a guy that he's got to move or a guy has to move, it's him getting to know himself again on that other side to rebuild that stance, rebuild that posture. That way, that preferred behavior becomes more natural, but he's relearning all over again.
I'll tell you something else that I've always found really interesting. It seems the offensive line, which is much different than the defensive line, for example, that the offensive line is almost a position. Like all those five guys, they always talked about McCarthy in Green Bay. He had the same five guys for how many years in a row, and that really made a difference. And he didn't, you don't mix and match. You don't bring in a guy for one series or something. And that can throw a lot of things off when one injury. So is that part of this as well, just knowing who's on your right and your left and how you guys move together? It feels like that's that's one tight end. That's one thing is the offensive line.
Well, again, from the outside looking in, you can say that because we do definitely say, it's five as one. You got five guys moving in unison as one. We also say it's the team within the team, but it's five individuals oftentimes that have to work a lot of times in perfect harmony and synchronicity. For instance, if you think about things like combo blocks, being on the same page with the guy next to you, when it comes to the continuity and the communication on the offensive line, I think that's a very key component of building a good offensive line. We talk so much and you hear so much about the O-line chemistry. And I think there is something to be said about that because what ends up happening is you just know how the guy next to you is going to fit a combo block. You just know how a guy next to you is going to pass off a twist game and a stunt. And sometimes that starts to happen without even verbally communicating. Sometimes it's just a grunt or a sound or you got kind of your inside lingo that you're making. So I think it really is important having the continuity of five guys up front. Now, with that being said, there's almost 100% injury rate in the NFL. At some point, you're going to get injured, and with that, a lot of times that moves the lineup. Now, ideally, for me being a former coach, we would ideally like to only have to replace one guy. Where you start to run into trouble is when you start to shuffle your offensive line, where all of a sudden, say your right guard goes down, and then you say, well, I'm going to move my center to right guard and then move in a new center or whatever it is. When you start to have to move and shift guys around and you end up with two or three new people in a lineup because of one injury or, two or three guys playing different positions they didn't play the previous snap because of an injury, that's where it starts to become really shaky.
Yeah, when it comes to that moving in unison thing, like Dan, we always talk about like, oh, he threw it before he came out of the break, right? You always talk about the chemistry between a quarterback and a receiver, but guys like Duke, like you can watch offensive line film, especially on those like duo blocks, like he's saying, and see one guy knew this other guy was going to be here and left without even seeing him. He just knows, like he can feel this guy. It's exactly the same as a quarterback and a receiver. It's fascinating to me. I was just too skinny to do it. But I think it's interesting, the whole guard thing. I hate putting together this is a consensus big board that says that he's the 31st player ranked in the draft, but he's the top guard, right?
Yeah.
So clearly nobody thinks he's the 31st best football player if he's the top guard. You're baking positional value somehow into that ranking and dinging him for being a guard. That being said, I have my theories on this, but I wonder if do you think, I know left tackle is still the most important position, but do you think we're moving towards a game where guard and tackle are a little more, or center for that matter, a little bit more considered evenly?
Well, I don't think left tackle is the most important position. I think that your tackles in tandem are important because now you got guys that rush both sides. When you look at like your Von Millers of the world or
Hell, they'll move
say,
Micah everywhere.
yeah, but you look at your TJ Watts and your Nick Bosa's, they rush over the right tackle. So you got to have a right tackle. Daniil Hunter rushes way better over the right tackle than he does the left tackle. He doesn't have the same skill set. So you got to have two. You have to have two functional tackles. But then and I'll say this. I think the tide has changed a bit because when you see guys like Aaron Donald, you see guys like Jalen Carter, you see guys like Grady Jarrett, you see guys like even Osa. You got to have a stout interior to be able to combat that, where those guys can absolutely wreck the game. So I think the old adage of left tackle is the most important. The game has evolved even in the last 5 to 10 years, where I think that you've got to be functional and good to very good across the board, period. And some players are going to live with them not being able to hold up against like the elite players, but they can win against kind of the rest of the league. And I think like that's just the reality of what the NFL is, because there's not 64 or even 75 elite offensive tackles who walk in this face of the earth. When you look at elite, the best of the best, if you're lucky to have one on each team, so I think that fans kind of get that wrong when they're looking at these players, and some players are going to struggle against the elite players. That's just how it is, and that goes on both sides. And not everybody can be elite. Not everybody can be very good. And I think there's levels to it in terms of having a functional starter, a steady starter, a good starter, a very good starter, an elite starter. There's a place for everybody that falls into that spectrum. And I think sometimes it's hard for fans to kind of understand the tiering of what a starter looks like and a functional starter looks like compared to their favorite player that is all world. And I made a comment the other day on social media is for the most part, teams know who these players are, like in terms of what they provide and what their ceiling and what their floor is. And for the most part, most players know who they are. I think a lot of time it's the media and the fans that kind of place these unfair narratives and expectations on these players. And then when they don't live up to them, it's outrage that they're a bust or they suck and all that. It's like, no, you just had this fantasy GM version of said player in your head that really isn't realistic. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic in that.
I wonder about the dynamic between you and the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Because you're we see it like the Mavs had a problem with Luka's people working on Luka and not our people working on him.
Well, yeah, and it's I don't know. I don't know if you know Bobby Stroop or if you've met him at all, but I've been friends with him for a minute. He works with Patrick.
I know Bobby Stroop.
He works with Patrick, and it's all I'm not gonna. I like hearing about. I don't want to say tension, but it is a thing. Like you've got your guy.
They pay people to be the coach of these players.
And Duke's like right there in Frisco, so yeah, it is an interesting dynamic to me.
Well, here's the thing about this, and I say this all the time. My work speaks for itself, first and foremost. And it doesn't matter what team it is, doesn't matter whose feelings are hurt, doesn't matter about the ego involved in any of this. The fact of the matter is I get results. So that's first and foremost. If I didn't get results, it would be a lot more of a hindrance, and it would be shut down a lot. The other thing is this. Let's take Zach Martin for example. Zach Martin is a guy that I worked with. Who are you really telling Zach Martin to listen to? I mean, he had 8 O-line coaches in like 11 years, So when you look at that, this league evolves and it changes all the time. And for offensive line, we just talked about a few minutes ago the importance of continuity. Well, to know offensive line is to know the personalities. Man, offensive linemen are some creatures of habit. They're able to adapt and to improvise, but like having a system in place, offensive linemen are system type people where they want a system, they want something of continuity. It's not just fly by night. And so me being able to be in Frisco and close, I think a lot of these guys have really leaned on that through a lot of coaching changes. And so I think maybe early on it might have been met with maybe a little resistance, but at some point it becomes undeniable. And at some point, like players are going to do what's best for them, and players are going to seek out the best. And I mean, for instance, like our facility in terms of recovery, we've got things like hyperbaric chambers and cryotherapy and red light beds and multi-spectrum beds and acoustic vibration. Those are all things that like most teams don't have. And so when we're talking about recovery and stuff like that, we're better than most teams when it comes to that. When it comes to individualized coaching, where I can sit down with a player for an hour and a half and break down every single play that and every snap that they took the Sunday before with detailed notes to kind of how I view it and collaborate with it. It's valuable to players. So for me, it's just about adding value to players and helping players realize their true potential no matter what. Because what I'm not trying to change anything about these players. What I'm trying to do is make sure we're putting them in the best position to, one, stay on the field, and then two, highlight and showcase their abilities and skills to the best of their ability within the structure of what their team wants.
We were doing a stream last night for the draft, and we had a couple of former players in here with us. and they were noting that it looked like the big boys were getting extra emotional. And it was the big linemen, and for some reason they were the ones that were crying, and they just seemed to be really, really taken by the moments. And one of our buddies who used to play college football was saying it's because they were like, you don't understand how they were when they were little kids. They were the big, awkward, fat kid.
Yep.
They were the
pants didn't fit right, teased.
Yeah. That they
heavy
like
breathers.
when you see the hot chick is like, oh, I went through my awkward phase. No. These kids really were.
Yeah.
They were ostracized. They were too big.
Like before you could kick ass, they were the kids you made fun of.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
And now
you can't carry the
rabbit got the gun.
You can't carry the ball in practice. You're too big, and So, do you subscribe to this theory that one of the reasons maybe that we see the big guys getting real emotional about the moment?
Yeah, I think there's probably some truth to that, but then I think also, that aside, I think it's the realization of all the hard work, all the struggles, the ups and downs, the sacrifices that you made. And, everybody dreams that their name is going to be called. I had 3 guys last night drafted in the first round. I had Will Campbell, Armand Membu, and Tyler Booker. And I know specifically, I put those guys through the ringer, Like I challenge them every single day in terms of how we prepared. So again, that's just one stop along the way on the journey. But I think it's really the realization of like, man, the time has really come where my dream has just been realized. I've just been drafted into the NFL. But as I always tell these guys when they first come in, I said, when you look at a train route or a bus route, and you know that you need to get to point Z, everything else in between are just stops along the way. They're not the final destination. So, when these guys come into the program and they've got the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Game, that's just a stop along the way. When they go to the Combine, that's just a stop along the way. When they do these 30 visits in the pro days, those are just stops along the way. Even the NFL draft is just a stop along the way on the journey. And that journey is always and forever expanding. And the goal for these guys now is the next stop is going to be rookie minicamp and then training camp and then that first game of the season, And so it's ever evolving journey for these guys to really realize their potential. And I think that's why it's also important for guys to set goals, is because what do you want out of this business now? Do you want to say that you made it, or do you want to really play and you want to be all pro, or do you want to be a future Hall of Famer? What does that take now? So I think what you're seeing though, when these guys get emotional, is just a realization that their dream has been realized.
Well, my buddy Mike did an article over at D Magazine, dmagazine.com. Click on sports, and you can read Mike's article about Duke Manyweather. It's a pleasure to talk to you, man. I've really
Can I
enjoyed...
throw one more thing in?
Yeah, no, that was.
I apologize.
No, it was pretty smooth in the next
I
one.
know you're
wrapping
up perfectly.
I've kind of already used the cadence that you use when you're ending the interview, so I don't
know,
really know how to talk after this.
I had to try to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I wanted this though. My last thing would be that. I wanted you to just give us a scouting report on the newest Cowboy, but also, because this is like one of your kids, you probably see also some flaws and what they need to improve upon. So, give us a full scouting report if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we've already mentioned is Tyler's ability to lead and just be a consummate professional already, how he goes about his business. But on the field, he's going to bring a physical presence. He's going to be a hit you in the mouth type guy. He's a guy that literally likes to try to make people quit when he's playing. And I think that mindset and mentality is important, because I think, as I talked about with him and Cooper Beebe and Tyler Smith, that brings a pretty physical interior offensive line. When it comes to pass protection, really does a great job using length on the inside, plays with good square power, is able to anchor, and is actually really good with recovery. One of the things that I thought is a really plus trait of his is what he's able to do on the move when he's able to pull to the outside or pull it in power. Really patient and diligent tracking down second level defenders and then being able to make impactful blocks and execute blocks on those defenders. One of the things that we're continuing to work on is just being able to replace the hands and pass protection. That way, they don't get too far outside, and that way it doesn't raise up his pad level, so defenders get underneath him. And then the other thing is make sure that he's maintaining a base that's a little more functional. Sometimes, because he's got such good hip mobility, he'll get really wide to get underneath the guy instead of trying to drop the hips down to lift the guy up. So those are pretty easy fixes that we've already been working on. Is just maintaining that base and that posture when you're taking on the bull rush.
When you're evaluating line, like I'm always reading, like this guy, people criticize this guy's arms are too short. Is that a thing? Not about him in particular, just in general. Like, do you read that stuff?
It depends. Like, so here's the thing: is if you're not a guy that is really highly effective with using your hands, and you're just more of a reach and guide and latch guy, then you need more length because you need to be able to keep guys out of your chest. So you need to be able to keep guys at bay. But if you're really surgical with independent hands and you're crafty with giving guys 1-2 and being able to clamp and then get one hand underneath, it's not really so much about the length that you need. It's about the overall hand usage. And so it really depends. It's not always black and white with, oh, this guy doesn't have length, because I've seen so many guys with length that couldn't block a troll on Twitter, so it doesn't matter. I can think of a ton of guys that have had 35 and 36-inch arms, and they just haven't put it together. But then if you go and look at guys like, Jason Peters was 33 and a half. Joe Thomas was around 33. I think Teron Armstead is around 33. David Bakhtiari around 33. So, there's not really a big difference between 33 and 32. There's a big difference between maybe 33 and 36, but there's not that many guys that are walking around with 36-inch arms either. And again, like, how are they using their hands? I think that becomes very important. I've never seen a tackle per se block somebody solely with just like, oh man, he did a great job of using his length on every play. There may be a couple of plays a game where length gets him out of some bad situations where, it just is able to widen the guy just a little bit, but it's not something that is consistently a part of a technique. It's like, oh, you're not sitting there striking a guy and then locking out on him out here trying to keep a guy at bay. That's just not how the game is played. These guys on the other side of the ball are trying to close space and get into your frame. And so, like, you got to be able to use your hands and protect your chest. And sometimes that's just a 6-inch to a foot window right in front of you, So it's not really about all the time about like, how much length and can he play long and stuff like that. There's a time and place for that where you do have to play quote unquote long with some independent hands and kind of take the fight to the defender. But length is really an asset. It's not an end all be all.
Or we could just make Manute Bol a great
Yep.
defensive
There you go.
tackle.
Sumo wrestler in the pipes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Duke, I appreciate it, man. I was just gonna wrap up by saying it's been cool to watch your scene from afar. It feels like you said, this is what I like, this is what I'm passionate about. I'm gonna figure out how to make it a job, and you did it, and it's just been really cool to watch.
I really appreciate that, man. I wake up every single day just loving what I do, and I think that is important, man. In a world now where there's so much negativity, there's so much just craziness right now. I can truly say that, football is an escape, but it also has become a lifestyle and a way of life for me. And so I had somebody the other day ask, they said, why do you give so much energy to these idiots on Twitter and argue with it? I said, because it's football, like, we're not arguing about politics. We're not arguing about, some of the vile stuff that people are arguing. I don't mind arguing about football. I don't mind educating about football because at the end of the day, it's a beautiful game. It just so happens that this beautiful game at the NFL level is still a beautiful game, but it's a fucked up business, and you got to kind of navigate that. But I don't mind it at all because, again, there could be a lot worse that we're engaging and arguing and having takes about.
Nah, man, I love it, man. It's been fun to watch. Do you want to maybe hit up Micah's brother and see if he could sit the next couple plays out on Twitter opinions, or are you just kind
Who,
of
who is it? Micah Parsons' brother.
maybe just not the day of the draft? Maybe we wait a couple days.
And here's the thing, man. I don't really pay attention to half of these people.
Do you deal with do you deal with a lot of out of control brothers and moms in the offensive lineman game, or is that more of a it feels like more of a quarterback or
listen, man, when it comes to me, period, I shut that shit down.
Yeah.
I'm not the one.
I used to tell Bobby that. I would go to their place out there and I'm like, you guys are teaching them how to run the 40. Great. Find someone to go wipe all of their social media accounts. This was like 2017.
Yeah.
You got to take care of it. Take care of
I always tell people you could try Jesus, but don't try me, man.
it. All right, Duke. It's good to finally meet you. We hope to talk to you soon. Congrats on all the success. Thanks for the Tylers.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
There he goes, Duke Manyweather. Mike did a great article on him if you want to check that out, dmagazine.com.